Hey everybody, welcome to G4G on YouTube. Today we are taking a look at the last in the video series of the power levels of Marvel Avengers Alliance characters throughout the Marvel games that have come since Marvel Avengers Alliance demise. So this series has been running for a little bit, and we've covered all of the previous Marvel Avengers Alliance classes, starting with the Tacticians, going to the Blasters, the Bruisers, the Scrappers, the Infiltrators, and today we're going to finish up with a short video of the Generalists, simply because there just wasn't nearly as many of them compared to the other classes. So if you haven't seen the other videos in the series, you'll know that what I'm doing is I'm taking characters from Marvel Avengers Alliance and I'm comparing to their representations in other games. Today's background soundtrack is brought to you by Mamadora Revere Under the Moonlight. It is a awesome game on the Switch. If you're a fan of Metroidvanias, go to the Switch and check it out. I do believe it's also on PC, maybe through Steam. I had the Switch version, played through it, and beat it with the good ending. Really liked it. So, we are going to have Marvel Avengers Alliance Redux up in the background. However, please understand, I will not answer any questions related to Marvel Avengers Alliance Redux in this video series. This is simply about comparing the characters to how they're represented in other games, and I am using Marvel Avengers Alliance Redux to talk about it a little bit for their abilities and such, but this video does not specifically pertain to Marvel Avengers Alliance Redux, so don't ask me, when is it coming out, how is the progress, what's Goofy doing? Don't. I'm just going to flat out ignore your comment, so just don't even bother wasting your time. Alright, let's go ahead and get right into it. So the first generalist that we're going to take a look at is Angel. And he was also represented in Marvel Avengers Alliance as Archangel for the Uncanny X-Force skin. So, Modern Angel was pretty decent in Marvel Avengers Alliance Redux, and he was actually part of what was considered the greatest PvP debacle of all time. The season in which Angel was the PvP hero was notorious for the fact that everybody in PvP Tournament Season 9 got Angel simply if they participated in that season at all. He was just given because something happened to that particular season. I don't remember what it was. It was early in my PvP career, Marvel Avengers Alliance, but I was given Angel and all of the other rewards from this season, which, if I remember correctly, included the Savant Spear and a few other things. Oh, it was the Spark Plugger. Okay, so it was the Aegis Armor and the Spark Plugger. I don't remember what season the Savant Spear was in. However, I do know that some people were jealous that I had it because they didn't get it that season. But this season, number 9, everybody got the Ada rewards. So note a bug allowed any player who achieved 50 ranked attacks to be placed in the Ada and receive Angel for free. Those who had 35 received Vibranium. So 50 is not too bad. I mean, in just 10 days, you earned all the rewards. Now, I do remember by hook or by crook, the Shepherd Staff, I did not complete that. This was in my quest list for a really, really long time because I didn't do it. But Angel was a gimme, and a lot of people showed as having an Ada win in their history, even if they were not anywhere near an Ada level character. That history aside, talking about him, he had the Scrapper and Blaster version in the Archangel suit, and he, of course, was just a generalist here. He was very interesting that he changed from a buffer and a team support person to a flat-out really, really nasty debuffer over here. And as a matter of fact, he was sort of very death-oriented because he gained health and stamina whenever any enemy or allies died. Now, Modern Angel was often an unsung character later in the game because he did a lot of things well, but people forgot about him. When he came out, for a few seasons afterwards, people used him on the defense because he was so big and flappy. I mean, look at this sprite. People put him in the center of their team so that when you were trying to click people, you often clicked on Angel, who was fairly resilient. You can see he's got a good amount of health over here. And you couldn't really click who you wanted to. Now people forgot. All you needed to do was click on the time bar up top or the health bar over here, and you could click around it. But look at this sprite compared to just Damon or even Bishop, who is bulky, Ares, who is bulky. Look at the difference. Like, Angel is flapping out of frame. It was a little cheesy to use him, but as you can see here with his actions of having the rising up on his level 1, getting lead the charge on his 2, divine inspiration and blessing, which were really solid, and benediction, which was the part for Imposinu Manus, the buff that would prevent somebody from being KO'd. He was a really popular hero for some time. Uncanny X-Force Archangel was darkly opposite with a very interesting thing over here with Pestilence. Now, this Nano Plague could become AoE with an ISO, but this Nano Plague had a 100% guaranteed rate of applying on Angel himself. So if Angel was actually able to hit somebody, it had a 100% of applying. So the hit granted the debuff. Pesty later on was nerfed that his Nano Plague on his level 1 only had a 60% chance of applying. So when you gave Archangel his ISO, that allowed him to spread Nano Plague to everybody with a 100% effective rate if he actually hit, means Archangel was technically, in some respects, harder than Pesty to deal with, and then he also had the spare. I really, really enjoyed Archangel, and him paired up with X-Force Psylocke got me Adamantium in two very, very different periods of time in Marvel Avengers Alliance. He was one of my first Ada season people, along with Psylocke in his Archangel suit. And then he came back when the meta had changed drastically at the end. I used them effectively a second time to do really good results. And they beat the meta because they were stealthy and they had the Fatal Blow. He is not in Marvel Strike Force. He is in Marvel Future Fight. And he was a team-up in Marvel Heroes. Oh, yeah, by the way, when I do the comparisons in this video, I'm comparing MAA to MSF and MFF. Not really Contest of Champions, because that's a very different kind of game. I would compare it to Marvel Avengers Alliance 2 if I remembered it well enough. Fuck Marvel Avengers Alliance Tactics. But I will also mention Marvel Heroes and cards in Marvel Battle Lines. He wins. His strongest representation was definitely Marvel Avengers Alliance. He is pretty solid in Marvel Future Fight, and I don't even know how strong the X-Force suit is now that it's there. I mean, he does well, but he's not meta. He can hold his own. He's a pretty solid character, but I still say by far in Marvel Avengers Alliance he was at his best. Similar to Angel is Beast. So Beast had some very interesting abilities when he first came out, and you did see him on a lot of PvP defense. He had the jungle, which was stealthy, and generalized them, and generalized became very good later on in the game, especially when you turned 15 and could activate your class benefits at will. Generalized did the opposite of power creep. Generalized got stronger as the game went on, and he was stealthy. War and Peace was a subtle debuff that says anytime that person would attack, Beast counterattacks, and that means he's counter-attacking with a generalized, which is vicious. All allies get combat awareness, which is a counter, and random beneficial effects for The Sun Also Rises, and then eventually Farewell to Arms, which exploits people who are taunting and causes off balance, and Cornered, which thereby, of course, reduces tanking. So Pants Beast, as he was often called, or Leather Pants Beast, was okay. Really where his strongest point was the fact that the jungle caused generalized. Pretty vicious. The rest of the abilities were okay. It's that generalized that was good, and then when he got counters later on with combat awareness and War and Peace, the jungle was very good. Now, you cannot talk about Beast without talking about Pestilence. The absolute game changer. Probably nobody affected the game more for a longer period of time than Pestilence because of Paradise Lost. Now, Quicksilver, or Bisquick for Blue Suit Quicksilver, of course, literally ran an entire class out of the game. Scrapper, Blue Suit Quicksilver just made it so you don't want to run Infiltrators because they were going to die. And then later on you had the Scroll of Rudamaroth, which was a way of having Pesty without having Pesty, but for that extremely long period of time where we were generally used to Quicksilver and we didn't have debuffs similar to Paradise Lost, Pesty was an absolute nightmare. Then when the Infiltrator ISO came out that said you did pre-counters, sure, a lot of people put it on Emma Frost, but people also put it on him because you had the generalized Nanoplague from Heart of Darkness, and you'll notice this was only a 60% chance. So first you had to land the attack, then you had a 60% chance of applying generalized. So the Nanoplague sort of got nerfed. He is not in Marvel Strike Force, he is in Marvel Future Fight, and he really has not been in any other game. He's not particularly good in Marvel Future Fight. He's more of a good buff for when you're using Wolverine, and he has a buff ability that when you swap him out, it carries to other teammates, which is good. His normal costume makes him a hero, but his Apocalypse costume makes him a villain, which means he is somewhat beneficial to a few of the AB dailies. However, he's not meta himself. Clearly, his strongest representation was Marvel Avengers Alliance. Even if you didn't have the pesty version of him, he was still pretty strong when he came out, and Generalized is nothing to shake a stick at. So I'm going to have to give it to Marvel Avengers Alliance. Blue Marvel is not a Marvel Strike Force. He is in Future Fight, and he, of course, was a Marvel Avengers Alliance. Now, some people like Twig absolutely loved Blue Marvel, thought he was great. They built good, people like him built really good Blue Marvels and liked him a lot. However, I always found Blue Marvel to just be a little boring and vanilla, and I don't think I really ever utilized him the way that he should have been. Maybe I just didn't kid him out right or something. I didn't like him. I didn't find him that good. I didn't find him that strong. He was sometimes an annoying tank to deal with when you ran into him on defense. And, you know, he certainly had good buffs over here. And I mean, this is not Rising Up. This is a guaranteed every buff of Rising Up, which is very good. And it removes debuffs. But really, this Antimatter Blast was his bread and butter. I just couldn't really get him to a point where I cared about him that much. He is in Marvel Future Fight, like I said, and he is considered pretty solid in Marvel Future Fight. The love affair that people had with him in Avengers Alliance carried to Future Fight, but he's a hard one to build up because his bios only come from the generator, which means spending resources to get him. So I would have to say he still was probably strongest in Marvel Avengers Alliance than Future Fight. I just don't know him well enough in Future Fight to really pass a good judgment there. Colleen Wing is a card in Marvel Strike Force, but a fairly low-level newbie-ish card. And I believe she was somebody to talk to. She was an NPC in Marvel Heroes, but she really hasn't appeared in any other games other than Marvel Avengers Alliance, so she kind of wins MAA hands down. Now, while I did think her damage was a little on the low side at times, I had fun playing with Colleen Wing while leveling her, and a lot of people said the actress who played Colleen Wing really saved the Iron Fist Netflix series from being absolute and 100% trash. While I'm not as critical of Iron Fist's first season as a lot of people were, I do agree that I think Colleen Wing kind of anchored the show. Destroyer is in Marvel Future Fight and has been for a long time, and was also in Marvel Avengers Alliance. He was a lockbox hero, and he was very, very interesting in the fact that he did a very, very good job of screwing around with energy. In Marvel Future Fight, he basically reflects energy attacks. And in Marvel Avengers Alliance, he was very energy-based, which meant that he was really good with people like Carolina Dean. I did a fun video that was called Carolina Dean Destroyer, which was KD and Destroyer teaming up together. And that is because of his passives. And that is the... he was very good as an anti-psychic defender and attacker, but as much as people said, oh, you know, this is a really heavy psychic season, I'm just going to use Destroyer, I don't think as many people stuck with it as they claimed to do. However, he was really fun when he had all his destructive essences up, and then you consume them to great effect on a lot of his abilities over here. He is used as a team buffer in Marvel Future Fight, and he was often used in alliance battles to reflect energy damage back to people who might be running energy-heavy teams. Yeah, again, I guess I really have to give his highest power level to Marvel Avengers Alliance. He's a very good kit in Marvel Future Fight, and there are situations where running Destroyer is an extremely good thing. However, I'm going to have to say I like him more in Marvel Avengers Alliance than anything. The sound effects are pretty cool, and I think they were fairly close to the Thor movie, because anybody who's ever seen the Thor movie knows probably one of the best things about it was the BWOP for Destroyer's beams. Faisa is not in any other game other than Marvel Avengers Alliance. Down the stretch, people hated her. My attitude was fucking deal with it. I dealt with it. I got around it. Deal with it. She wasn't worth the hate. Mockingbird is in a few games. I do think she might... I don't think she's a card in Marvel Battle Lines, but she was in Marvel Future Fight and was considered a pretty decent speed character for a little while. But not much to write home about. What really bumped Mockingbird up was somewhat towards the end of the game when Nurkod shows up, and that's because of her ability to go from Tactician to Bruiser, change classes at whim, so on and so forth. Mockingbird was a fun character when she got certain ISOs. She had really, really good secretly destructive hits with like Mocking Blow. The fact that she caused pressure points was always good for people. The critical intel was fun. Her class switching was fun and often really annoying. I'm going to have to say she was at her strongest in Marvel Avengers Alliance. MAA is pretty much winning everything hands down so far in this video. We got to see if it'll keep it up. Next up is Moon Knight. Moon Knight was a highly unique character, and they had a really cool covert ops when he was coming out, and that gave us the Vigilante Toolkit. The reason why we got the Vigilante Toolkit is it resembled the different aspects of Moon Knight's personalities, and that was the Captain America personality, the Spider-Man version, and the Wolverine version. So the Vigilante kit would go on to have holographic shields, a web shooter, and claws. He is not in Marvel Strike Force. I do not think he's a card of Marvel Battle Lines. He is represented in Marvel Future Fight. For a period of time, Marvel Knights' Moon Knight over here was a meta character for combat. He was the go-to combat hero character. He was also in Marvel Heroes, and I think it was pretty fun in Marvel Heroes, as Marvel Heroes really dealt with a lot of his moon aspects, more than I think any of the other games did. I have to say he is probably... I gotta call this one a tie. I'm sorry, it's a little bit of a cop-out here, and I get it, but I feel that his Marvel Avengers Alliance character is probably just as good as his Marvel Future Fight character, because he used to be combat meta. He was able to have certain abilities that basically took him above the battlefield, where he was untargetable and rained down crescent darts on the enemy. And he just stayed out of combat a lot, so he did damage without being hit. In Marvel Avengers Alliance, he was solid and annoying to deal with at times, but I'm going to have to say it's a tie of like above average character development. Punisher, of course, shows up everywhere. He's MCU, so he's going to show up in just about any Marvel game possible. He's got a decent card in Marvel Battle Lines. He is in Marvel Future Fight. He is also in Marvel Strike Force. This is going to be a tough one because he's very good as an anti-villain person in Marvel Strike Force. However, his huge kit of being able to be any class possible, and the fact that his abilities really changed as he changed characters over here, I must say that he was probably strongest in Marvel Avengers Alliance. He tends to show up well in just about any game that you put him in. He makes a pretty good name for himself, but I think Marvel Avengers Alliance, with the character swapping and everything, is really where he was at his best. Plus, he then later got some ISOs that also helped a few things out. After that is Red She-Hulk. Really does not exist in any other game other than Marvel Avengers Alliance. Rogue. So, Rogue was a character that I always wanted to be represented very, very well in the games that she was in. Marvel Avengers Alliance did a really good job with Rogue. I mean, they did a really uncanny, pun intended, job of doing a good Rogue. Now, regular Rogue was okay, but Femme Rogue, as she was known, especially in the Nico and Pesty era, and that arcade Spec Ops and everything like that, the whole Memento Mori No Mercy kit, Femme Rogue was a nightmare, especially Infiltrator Femme Rogue. She hit like an absolute beast. If Beast was on the field as Pesty, you couldn't get rid of these debuffs that you were dealing with, and they basically just weakened the shit out of you so that you withered away and died like, a cut plant or a cut flower 5 weeks after it's been cut. She was in Marvel Future Fight. She was in Marvel Heroes. She is not in Marvel Strike Force. I know I said I was going to break my own rules originally, but then I called it a tie. For this one, as good as Femme Rogue was, for me, the power fantasy of playing Rogue, I'm going to say Marvel Heroes did it better than anybody else. In Marvel Avengers Alliance, you were able to kind of, touch somebody and get their class and get some class benefits and everything. And Modern had some stuff that the absorb powers are now permanent, retains each absorbed class's benefits, so you could have like a bruiser, enraged, scrapper, rogue, and whatnot. But in Marvel Heroes, Rogue was able to touch enemies and touch heroes and get a portion of their power and then store it in her skill tree to be used later on. So maybe you got a shield from Magneto, but flames from Pyro, you would just store them in your talent tree and then slot them in as you saw fit. So you could truly build Rogue that had a whole bunch of nifty stuff on it. If you wanted to be a Magneto Storm Rogue, you could. If you wanted to be a Gambit Iron Fist Rogue, like, she was just really, really good in Marvel Heroes. And as fun as Fam Rogue was, for me, I think she was strongest in Marvel Heroes. Silk was added to the game, not super late, but she was, later than a lot of characters. She was quite a good deal of fun when she came out. It was fun playing her. She is not represented in Marvel Battle Lines, but she is a Marvel Future Fight. She's a speed character in Marvel Future Fight, and she was considered a speed queen for some time in Marvel Future Fight, where she was the go-to speed daily character. However, she's been replaced many times over and really isn't part of any metas anywhere. I always liked Silk's kit. I always found it fun to use her abilities. I'm going to have to say Marvel Avengers Alliance is where she was at her strongest, despite the fact that she used to rule the roost for a little while in Marvel Future Fight. Spider-Man Noir, unfortunately, is not in any other games, but we all know what Spider-Man Noir was capable of, especially with follow-up and counter-based teams, or the agent running weapons that followed up on counters and extra attacks and everything. If you saw Spider-Man Noir and like Rocket or Star-Lord on the enemy team's defense, you knew you were probably in for some shit. And he certainly did a good job of it. He also had several passives that made him really good, including the Danger Sense and the Trigger Man debuff. He was able to do a lot of damage himself, but he was also a good team buffer. Taskmaster, while making appearances in other games, is not really playable anywhere else, and it could be interesting to see somebody tackle Taskmaster. And similar to Moon Knight, he's somebody who would have a ton of other characters' abilities, so he could switch between, much like Punisher, he could kind of switch between these at will, and had a very, very good kit, like a Captain Steve Rogers kit and whatnot. Clearly he was at his strongest in Marvel Avengers Alliance, because that's the only other game where he was around, although he was a major NPC in Marvel Heroes and guided you to do some quests to find him in the early game. And finally, White Tiger. So White Tiger was one of those characters that was heralding the end of the game. She came out and was the first one who was just so ridiculously OP, we wondered what the shit Playdom was doing. She is in Marvel Future Fight, and she is reasonable, but she's nowhere. She's not any meta or any kind of strong. She had Determined, which means you couldn't put dots on her. She gave Primal Fear to enemies, reducing a whole bunch of their stats. Jade Tiger Amulet, all enemies gain. Okay, I'm sorry. So Determined, resistant to stun and incapacitation, immune to fear. Jade Tiger Amulet, which I just read off, and also self-defense, where she preemptively counters. Had she lived in the game, she would be great for Spider-Man Noir, Iron Fist, Rocket Raccoon, Star-Lord, etc. She was just extremely overpowered, especially when in the challenge of the Tiger God mode. She was very, very strong, and I think she was Playdom's first real attempt at trying to counter the Worthy. And by being immune to the things that she was immune to, it seemed like Playdom's like, alright, if the Worthy are giving you an issue, use White Tiger. But I think they left her power dial on, look, the knob goes to 11, because I think they knew they were ending the game and they never tried to balance her. She will likely be balanced in the future, but Marvel Avengers Alliance, she clearly wins over there compared to her Marvel Future Fight counterpart. So, wrapping up the video, most of these people did win in Marvel Avengers Alliance, and a good amount of them are represented in other games, with the exception of Faisa and Red She-Hulk and Spider-Man Noir. Also Taskmaster, despite the fact that Taskmaster was very, very much mentioned in the beginning games, or the beginning parts of the Marvel Heroes game. Punisher, of course, is just about everywhere that he can be. And, you know, Moon Knight is also a super popular character, and he tends to show up in a lot of games. But for the most part, Marvel Avengers Alliance won, with the exception of Rogue, where my power fantasy of her gaining a lot of abilities from touching people was more realized in Marvel Heroes than anything else. So that's it for me, guys. That wraps up the video series. If you haven't seen any but this generalist video, go back and look at my other videos on the topic. We will now consider this closed. And yeah, going forward is going to be interesting as, you know, a few things are being worked on and hopefully getting closer to a little bit of another release and such. So that's it, guys. Hope you enjoyed the video. Let me know what you think of my character assessments down in the comments below, and peace out, everybody.